Well, there must be some mistake. Obviously, they've made some mistake. You know, it can't be like that, and it gets blown off and brushed aside. And nobody will publish that because it's obviously wrong, because it doesn't fit our belief. Okay, so what are the problems here? The problem is fear. Right? Fear creates wants, needs, desires, expectations, ego. Okay, that's fear. Okay. On the love side, you've got things like compassion, caring, you know, those sorts of things. Okay. So beliefs are a big part of that enemy. Most beliefs are fear generated. We believe something because we have fear of the unknown. We don't like the idea there's something important and we don't know it. So if we're in that situation where there's something important and we don't know it, we make up a belief about it. Now we're done. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So that tends to be the way it is. People will come, you know, to one of my talks, and sometimes those people come to find out whether or not they should believe what I say. You know, should we believe this or not? You see, that's the wrong question. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. You can say, I believe it, or I believe that it's true, I believe it is not true. Neither one will get you anything. No value in either one of those. What's valuable is, what can I learn from it? What does this do for me? What patterns does it pull together? How does this affect me? Is it useful to me? If it's useful to you, does it matter? It doesn't matter, you see. Like Carlos Castaneda wrote all those books, you know, 20 or 30 years ago. And then there's this big deal about, was he making all that up or not? And if you read his books and you got something out of them, they pulled something together for you and they were useful, then they were useful. So let's say they were useful and you really got something out of it, but he was making them up. Does it make any difference? No. You got something out of it that clicked and put it together. And let's say you didn't get anything out of it, it just hits you totally cold, you know, it didn't make any sense to you at all, but it was, he actually had those experiences. Does it make any difference? No, you didn't get anything out of it. You see? So that's the wrong question. Should I believe it or not? Irrelevant. Belief is the problem. Why do people want to know whether they should believe what I say or not? Because they don't want the uncertainty of, well, maybe. Well, this is important, so I gotta have to do some work. I'm gonna have to think about this, I'm gonna have to do some experiments. It's my responsibility now, you see, to do something about it. Whereas if they can say, well, I believe him or I don't believe him, they're done. They really have no longer, they can either just accept what I say and go on with it, or they can throw it aside and go on. Either way is sterile. There's no learning involved. So it's the wrong question. So belief is a big issue, because as soon as you believe something, you no longer have any room to change it, because you already know the answer. That's why these physicists are hung up on, they can't believe what Paralabs does, because, you see, it's a matter of belief for them. They believe it must be wrong because it conflicts with what they believe. That's a, you know, that's a no-winner. That's why, you know, Richard Feynman, probably one of the best quantum theorists that, you know, physics community has produced for a while. You know, his comment when graduate students said, well, Dr. Feynman, what's really going on here in this quantum experiment, this double slit? What's happening? And his comment, quote, is, shut up and calculate, unquote. Why did he say that? Because nobody knew why particles should be probability distributions. Just do the math and come out with the prediction and the answer and it'll work, and don't bother yourself about what's going on, because it's impossible. Nobody will ever understand. Nobody will ever know. You see, well, that was only true. Nobody will ever know if their belief puts them in a space where the answer doesn't exist. If they can't get out of the box to find the answer that doesn't exist in the box. It exists outside of the box. So it is impossible for them unless they can get rid of their belief and see from a bigger perspective. So that's kind of a short story of who we are, you know, what consciousness is, why the paranormal is normal. You know, you can heal with your mind, sure. You can remote view, you can do all these things. It's just simple. You gather in data. When you see an aura, okay, what are you doing? You're gathering data with an intent. You have an intent to get certain information, and you get to specify the output format. You can get that output format in a picture. You can get that output format in a graph if you want. They'd probably even sing you a song if that's the way you wanted the output. You know, you can get it any way you want. You know, I learned these things through experiment. You know, doing experiments in the larger consciousness system, you kind of see how it works. Maybe some other things. You know, the light we use when we heal. You know, healers will use a white light sometimes to they'll visualize the stuff that needs to be healed as a black spot in somebody's, you know, etheric body, and then they'll use this light to burn out the black spot. Well, the light is just a metaphor. The reason they need that light is because they have a belief that you can't affect something if you don't do something to it. You see, the light's not necessary. The light doesn't even exist. And other people say, well, it's energy. It's all energy is a metaphor. Energy is just a metaphor of being able to affect something. You need energy. See, energy changes things. It affects things. It moves things. So if you can do something, then it's energy. So if I heal you with my mind and it changes something, well, I had to send you energy. See, it's just a metaphor. All it is intent. Okay. So how do things like astrology and throwing chicken bones on the ground and reading tea leaves, you know, how do those things work? Well, you've got a systems. All of those are systems with a lot of uncertainty in them. How those chicken bones fall has a lot of uncertainty. Could be any number of ways, right? How those I Ching rods, or however it is you make your hexagram fall, have a lot of uncertainty in it. Okay, the way you interpret all those heavenly bodies at just that moment when somebody was born, when you might be off by, you know, minutes or seconds, because even if you have that data, some doctor looked at a watch that plus or minus 5 minutes, you know, you don't know. So there's lots of uncertainty in it. You interpret. You interpret the bones. It's your interpretation. What's your interpretation? Your intent goes out for the information. Future probable database brings the information back. That's how you get the interpretation from the bones. Is kind of a deal between you and the larger conscious system for the output format. The output format is how the chicken bones lie. You see, that's your output format. Or, you know, how the tea leaves, you know, swirl in the teacup. Or just how you put the interpretation on all the heavenly bodies, or the tarot cards. You see, that's your output format. And you can get an output format in how the chicken bones fall, you know, or how the tarot cards go. Now, if you looked at those tarot cards, and you looked at every one of them, and you said, okay, here they are in this order, and you wrote it all down on a piece of paper, you put the deck back, so now there's a list here in this physical reality that says what every card is, right? Well, guess what? You'll just get those cards in that order when they come up, because we've done the measurement, right? That's the measurement problem. We've done the measurement. It's in this reality. Nothing else can happen. But now let's say you have a customer come in, you shuffle the deck, you have no idea where those cards are. And you have this client, and you are connecting with that virtual reality base, and these cards are your output format. Well, just the cards you need comes up at just the right time, so just what it is that you need to say to them, you see? It's all part of the larger consciousness system. This system wants you to succeed. Your evolution is its evolution. Your success is its success. It wants you to succeed, so it wants to help you succeed. That's why we have synchronicity. It's trying to help you succeed, make the right thing happen, give you the opportunity. But you still have to grab the opportunity with your free will. Okay? So, you know, why do we have crop circles? Well, the general thought is people couldn't do it. Why? Because these intricate designs show up overnight, you know. They happen in like a 4-hour period, and there's no noise. You know, there's nobody coming and going, no little footprints here, you know, no mistakes, and very intricate designs. We say, well, that couldn't have been done by people. It just doesn't make sense, besides the little burn marks on the stalks and their benches this way and that way. And that would take lots and lots of people, lots and lots of hours to do that, and they couldn't do it silently. You can't have, you know, 500 people tramping around in a field and not make any noise, you know, in the dark, right? It doesn't work. So if people didn't do it, somebody had to do it. Well, then it must be aliens, right? Aliens must have done it. Must be ETs, people in spaceships. Well, that's just a habit of thinking. We think that our reality is just physical, right? We're in this physical reality, so if we, the physical beings, humans, didn't do it, then some other physical being somewhere had to do it, and If there are some other physical beings rather than us humans from this earth, then they must be from some other planet someplace. So we immediately jump to the conclusion that aliens did it. Okay? Well, the larger consciousness system does all kinds of things to get your attention. It wants you to succeed. Those visions that you had that just suddenly, made you understand things. It's the larger consciousness system. That's synchronicity. That's nudges from the larger consciousness system. It's things that put together. Well, the largest consciousness system wants us to question the idea that this physical reality is all there is and is done. It wants us to have a bigger picture. Okay, now we jump to the conclusion that it's aliens. But the larger consciousness system owns all the data, owns all the information. This is a virtual reality. If you were the programmer in World of Warcraft, could you create a crop circle somewhere on the board in World of Warcraft? Of course you could. It wouldn't be a big deal, right? Just program it in there. If you're the larger consciousness system, can you make a crop circle anywhere you want? Sure. It doesn't take any time, doesn't make any noise. It's your game. It's a digital game. And you're you're in charge, basically. Not a hard thing to do. I had an engineer friend who had a vision. One night he actually had a dream, and he saw this airplane, and he knew airplanes real well, so he knew it was a certain make, certain model, certain type, date it was manufactured, that kind of stuff by looking at the airplane. And he went on board the airplane and looked at all the people, and he says it was just as clear as any physical experience he had ever had. He could see what they were wearing, the kind of earrings with, in the lady's ear, everything. He found everybody on that plane was in black and white, except one little girl. 2 days later, a plane crashed. Everybody was killed but one little girl, and it was the exact same make and model of plane that he had seen. Okay, well that changed his life, because his whole world just got turned upside down, because that was impossible, but yet he couldn't deny it. It happened to him. Lots of people have things like that happen to them that they can't deny, whether it's out of body or remote viewing or past lives or whatever it is. Well, his question to me was, why me? Why did that happen? Why did I have that experience? Well, it was an eye-opener. It's cold water in the face. It's like, wake up. Reality is bigger than you think. It's not just a simple thing. And what did it do for him? It made a seeker out of him. He started reading books. He started going and Googling stuff, consciousness and, precognitive dreams and all this stuff, because he was interested. And he finally ended up on my site, and he was writing me, but he was very distressed over this sort of thing, and because it's impossible, yet it happened. So his conclusion was reality was bigger and more complex than he thought, and now he wanted to find out about it. You see, that's why it happened to him. It wasn't about the people on the plane. It really wasn't about anything that had to do with the paranormal event, other than it was an experience for him to help him grow and grow up. Learn. The system wants you to succeed. It nudges you, gives you all the help you need, if you just listen and if you just let it. And that's why when we all sort of live in the moment, get rid of our ego, get rid of our fears, our anxieties, our expectations, our wants, our needs, the desires, all that chatter is going on in our head all the time. If we let all that go, just live in the moment and be, rather than act, we just be, we generally find that everything we need to grow falls right at our feet just about the time we need to have it. Because we're now cooperating, really, with the system, rather than struggling against it. Trying to fight it, trying to control it, make it be the way we want it. Here's the way I want things to be, and here's the way I want you to be, We do that to the people we love a lot, the way we think they ought to be, and we try to make them be what we want them to be, what we need. Well, if it's about us, what we need, well, of course, it's just for their own good, right? We're really just thinking about them, but that's not true. It's what we need them to be. Then, if the vector points towards you and it's about you, that's fear. If it points toward them and you're really caring about their needs, then that's love. You see the difference? So if we're struggling and we've got this idea that life is tough, life sucks, it's just one bad event after another. You know, I just get this struggle under control, and then I get another one. You know, I get maybe a couple of days reprieve, and something else happens. And I almost had this together, and then I broke my ankle, and I almost had this, but I lost my job, and all these things. People see life as a constant struggle to control things, to make them the way they want, make their relationships the way they want, you know, make their work the way they want, make the whole world work the way they want it. And if you're struggling to try to make it fit you, you will always struggle. You'll find that life will be full of pain and full of unpleasantness, and you won't find happiness. Happiness isn't a goal. Happiness is a byproduct of a life well lived. It's a byproduct of a good attitude. So you have to have no expectations, no fear, no ego. Now, what's ego? You know, some people will say, well, you have to have ego. If you don't have ego, people walk all over you. They'll push you around. If you don't have this sense of, you know, don't tread on me, you know, you'll be abused. That's not the case. If you have no ego, no fear, that makes you powerful. That makes you strong. Okay. Look at the people who have had the biggest lasting, most lasting effect on us, on people. Pick a couple of them out. Martin Luther King, right? Have some others, right? Maybe Mother Teresa had a very big effect on people because of her good example. We have Gandhi. What did they do? They changed whole cultures, and they changed them in, you know, less than a decade. Attitudes of millions of people changed. Why? Because they were powerful. They really could change things. And the changes they instituted are still going on. They're still multiplying. Right? It's not like, well, okay, that happened, it's all done, and everything's back to the way it was. They had power. And the power was the power of love. You know, Martin Luther King wasn't about getting even. It was about, we're all brothers. You know, we need to treat each other with love and caring and consideration. That's what it was about. Had it been about, you know, white against black, it would have failed. It just would have made the situation worse. You know, you don't change the larger society by going out and forcing it into your image, even if you do know what's right. You change it by changing yourself. That's the only thing you can change. It's the only person that you have control over is you. And you can change the world, if you will, first and foremost by changing yourself, because you're a part of it. That's the key. Gandhi said, "What be the change you wish to see in the world." It's the same concept. So the way we make changes to our world is with us, because if we change, that helps the people around us change. Now, you can't change anybody else. You can't force anybody else to change, but you can give them an environment that makes it easier for them to change. If their environment is one of trust and caring, now they have the courage to go out and try something new. If their environment is fear and, you know, withdrawn, they're not going to change. They're just going to retreat deeper into that same old belief system. Okay, so that's it. Now let's do questions. I think I've given you probably more than you wanted. It's just the way it all falls together. It's a very, actually it's a very simple theory and a simple idea, and so far it has explained everything. I'm open. I've always been open for data. Is there something that doesn't fall under this, that doesn't have an explanation, some kind of phenomena, some kind of thing? And so far everything kind of falls in this. I haven't found anything that falls outside of it yet. So I'd like, people have any questions? Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to put a personal experience into the context of this virtual reality that you just explained. I remember on my 40th birthday I had a problem with an artery which completely collapsed. And doctors said, well, you're just going to have to live with that. You're lucky to have cross circulation in your brain. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And I decided to put an image up on the patio door. But I realized, and to see if I could visualize it back into repair. And it did happen. But one of the things that happened, I think this is a distinction between an intention and must-have. I looked at it as an experiment. Let's just see what happens. I don't care whether it happens at all. And there's something about that attitude, I think, that you hint at in what you're saying, but I wonder if you could get into that.
Sure. Well, the difference between, between having a, what can I say, an open approach to it, to where you're not, you don't have an expectation or a need for it to be a certain way. You're just open to it. What that is approaching it without ego. That need, how you want it to come out, how you need it to come out, that's all about ego. Ego is part of the noise. So yes, your intention is much stronger if you get rid of the noise. It's just your intent. If it's, oh my God, I've got this thing in here, I'm going to have to fix it. It's terrible because my brain may not work. And well, what are you doing then? That's the placebo effect in reverse. You're helping create a bad ending with your fear. We make our fears come true because we put energy into it, just like with the placebo effect, we put energy into, making a healing come true. We control our reality in lots of ways. One way is we change probable future for ourselves. Okay. Another way is we just get data. It's all we get, and then we have to interpret it. You can never share an experience with anybody else. You can only share a description of that experience. You're the only one that has that experience. It's your experience, it's subjective, and it's personal, and you can't share that. You see, so all we get is data, and then we interpret it. How do we interpret it? We interpret it in terms of our own, what I call experience base. All of our knowledge, our fear, our beliefs, our expectations. All of that stuff goes into our interpretation. And where did that data come from? It came from another individual. And guess what? That data was sent to us, and it's cloaked in their fear, their beliefs, their expectations, all of that stuff. So you're getting one that's cloaked in that, it's been filtered through their filter. You're receiving the data. You receive it through your filter, and it's no wonder that we have a hard time communicating with each other, right? So you change your reality based on your interpretation. You create your own reality based on your interpretation. You may interpret something as a slight when it was never meant that way. It's just your interpretation. Then in your mind, it's a slight. In the sender's mind, there was no such thing. It may have even been a compliment. Hard to say. So you create your environment. If you think that you live in a world that sucks, guess what? It'll suck. Everything that happens to you will be unpleasant. You'll have all this junk. Your relationships will deteriorate. People won't treat you nice, and etc. Because that's what you're creating through your interpretation. That's your expectation. So your ego's now involved in it. It's also what you're projecting for future, probability. So we create our reality in several ways. We also create a reality in that people react to us. It's not a single, we're not single players and everybody else is an illusion. We're in this game with a lot of other people, and it's a multiplayer game. So if you act rude and abusive to people, don't expect them to like you and treat you with kindness and love. They're going to be a little rude and maybe abusive back because that's how they react to that sort of thing. So what you get, you're creating that then again by your own behavior. So that's the third way that we create our own reality. So there's lots of us in what happened. So you look out in this big world and you say, well, why does the world, so awful? Why do we have all this terrible stuff going on in the world? Well, it's us. That's an honest reflection of who we are. That's the level of fear and ego and expectations and needs and wants and desires that are in the world. It's like that. So it's a good representation of us. And how do you fix it? Start with yourself. We fix us, because if we could fix all of us, guess what? All of those mean people that are abusing us all the time, we'll fix them too. Because what will happen is, you see, we have this, sometimes it's called like the 100th monkey thing. What happens is we have group mind as well. We have cultures, and within those cultures, we're sharing all the time the information we have. We're all netted. Everyone, all 7 billion of us, we're all netted. But those that we interact with, we kind of have that website, if you will, opened up. It's kind of on our screen. We've got that in our favorites, so we get that information all the time. And we influence each other. So if we're thinking real positive and good thoughts and whatever, the people around us tend to be more positive and good thoughts. At least we encourage that. We make that more probable, you see. So eventually, if we all thought better, if we increase the quality of our consciousness, if we decrease the entropy of our consciousness, then the people around us would kind of be that way too. And it works the other way. You get a bunch of people who have really bad thoughts. We call that a mob, right? And the mob will act worse than any one of them would act on their own, because they encourage each other to be violent or, whatever. Well, we encourage each other to be love. It works both ways. So if a large number of people were positive, low entropy, beings of love, guess what? Those nasty people who, keep us in servitude, well, they don't live forever, you see. They go away eventually. They have lifespans just like the rest of us. And the people coming along would have more seeped in by their culture. This more loving culture they're in would produce more loving people to fill up those slots, you see. That's how you fix the thing. You have to fix it with yourself. You can't force somebody else to be different. You can take people and you can change things in the physical world. You could get rid of all those awful people and you wouldn't change much at all. You just change the names. It's like getting rid of a dictator, in South America, and another that's just replaced by a different dictator. You haven't really gained a whole lot. Well, most of the people aren't that mean and awful, don't go around being mass murderers and things. They're not that awful, and you think, well, then there are these people who are really awful, they do terrible things. One of the reasons that most of us don't do terrible things is we don't have the opportunity. We don't have that amount of power. We're not making decisions that affect millions, if not billions of people. If we did, we'd make them from who we are. And if we were full of fear and ego, our decisions would reflect that fear and that ego. Okay? So the way you change it, again, it has to be from the inside out. You had a question.
Yeah, but one quick comment, since you were building on the double slit experiment. I have a colleague of mine who's a fairly well-known physicist in this community, who's actually now conducting remote intention experiments on double slit in a isolated Faraday cage chamber and everything, and getting very strong results that exactly what people intend at a distance, thousands of miles away, is affecting the double slit.
Sure.
So, that I think, but whether or not, of course, physicists will believe that in the
Yeah.
end.
Well, that's the evidence.
Right.
People say, well, can you prove it? Well, it's not about proof. Proof isn't the deal. The deal is evidence. What's the evidence say?
Right.
And the evidence would say that because that double slit experiment has uncertainty into what you're going to get at any particular time, that uncertainty can be manipulated or modified, if you will, by a conscious intent. That's just the way the world works. So,
Right. So he's exactly trying to show that consciousness can affect the most fundamental principle
right.
and experiences. But a question I had for you is, you started with describing your experiments in this chamber doing research. And what is your perception base on which you had that? Obviously, you were traveling or in consciousness in a different set space. You needed to be wired up to have your brain talk so you could record your conversation, so it could be recorded in this space. But
right.
I know Robert Monroe called it astral traveling. And
Right.
Is that what you would call it, or is that different in your mind?
Well, actually, Bob Monroe called it the out-of-body experience.
Right.
Before that, it was called astral travel, but Bob thought that there was too much baggage, too much theology and other things stuck to astral travel, so he called it out-of-body to let all that baggage go by. He kind of coined that term. That's a very unfortunate name for it, out-of-body experience. Why? Because it makes people think it has something to do with the body. You've got a spirit inside your body, and you got to get it out of your body, and so it can go out and fly around in the larger consciousness system. You see, it has nothing to do with the body. You don't even have a body. It's just a virtual body. It's a set of constraints based on a simulation. You see, it has nothing to do with the body. What you need to do is become aware of other data streams. Be able to switch from this data stream to a different data stream. You need to be aware to take in a larger set, and you can be in coupled data streams. That's parallel processing. So you can be talking to a microphone and still experiencing out there at the same time. Lots of times when people ask me to help them heal something, they'll be telling me about it, and while they're telling me about it, I'm already doing it. You can work You can multi-process in 2 or 3, even 4 reality frames at the same time. It's not so hard to do. It just takes a little bit of practice. So out of body is a poor term that confuses people. Bob wrote in his books that he rolled out of body. There are tens of thousands of people who lie in bed at night going like this, trying to roll out of body, and it doesn't seem to work. And then there's the climbing rope trick where they go out of body by, pulling up a rope, and there's the lift the non-physical arm up and look at it, and all these things that have to do with the physical. You see, they're trying to get this phenomena out of the physical, and it's not in the physical. Don't get out of the body, get into your mind. That's the thing that you're doing. It's just an intention and a focus. That's all it requires. Just an intention and a focus. It has nothing to do with getting out of a body. You never were in the body in the first place. You see, so it's an unfortunate. Bob called it that because it was descriptive, that his consciousness was no longer confined to the rule set, where his apparent physical body was. So he called it that, but it really confuses people. So that's not it. Once you see, people make it very difficult. They have all these expectations. Bob wrote in his books about a park he visited. This bucolic kind of place. He would go there, and it was a beautiful place, and he'd meet friends there, other sorts of things. So now people have the idea that this park actually exists because Bob went there while he was out of body, and he's Mr. Out of Body. That was just Bob's interpretation of the data he got. Bob Monroe's park as a beautiful place to sit and relax and converse with friends is somebody else's sitting in the middle of a lake in a rowboat, or standing on a mountaintop, or any number of other things. You see? So Bob's interpretation of the data was a park, but people don't understand that it's just an interpretation based on Bob. So now you have, again, 100,000 people trying to have Bob Monroe's experience. And of course they can do that because if they have an expectation of a park, they'll create a park because that's what they're looking for, and they'll get some data and they'll make a park out of it. But we have to get away from the idea that that park is a place that exists as an objective reality. The data Bob got came from an objective source, yes, but his interpretation of the park was Bob Monroe's interpretation of the data. So the out-of-body phenomena isn't about going to places. See, we just take this reality frame and we kind of imagine that the other reality frame is just like this one. It isn't just like this one at all. It's just information. And you can interpret that information many different ways. So that's, I don't know if that helps you, if any of you are interested in doing out-of-body and that kind of stuff, but it's not that you should have Bob Monroe's experience or anybody else's experience. It's one of the reasons I don't tell stories about, my adventures in the larger reality. That is counterproductive for people. They start wanting to have my experience. They start taking what I've told them as an objective fact that they then, have to find, or they're not doing it right. If they can't find the park, then obviously they're not out of body because, Bob told them where the park was, and they can't get there. So it just does people a disservice because it makes them try to have your experience, to have your interpretation, and they have to have their own experience through their own interpretation. Get their own, again, do you believe it or not? It doesn't matter. Is it useful for you? Do you get something out of it? Is there something there that improves who you are, that brings you closer to being loved, lets you understand things in a bigger picture? That's what's important. Belief is irrelevant. Okay, having somebody else's experience is not easy. Most people fail trying to have somebody else's experience. That's why so many people can't get out of body. They're trying to have someone else's experience.
I think the question was more about what is the perception you were using, because you obviously weren't seeing these things with your physical eyes.
Oh no, you don't see things with your physical eyes. You don't have physical eyes. There are no eyes, ears, or whatever. It's just data. Consciousness, individuated units of consciousness are pieces of a digital information system. And what they do is share data. What they are is a piece of data. I shouldn't say a piece of data, their history, their probable future, their everything that they've ever done, ever thought, ever felt, whatever. It's all part of them. That's the data set that kind of makes them up. Add free will to that, and now they can make choices. Okay, so what you do is you exchange information. You never see the source of the data. The source of the data is beyond what you can deal with. All you get is the data. And the source of the data and the data are not the same thing. So you never really, get the source of the data. You just get the information and interpret it. So what you're getting is a telepathic communication from being to being over this net, if you will, this information system. And that intent is created, that data is created by intent. So if I intend to send you some information, then I send that information to you because my intent does it. Just like I can intend to get information out of a database or get information out of your mind. Your intent is the motivator here. It's the query language, if you will, is in intent. And intent is the prime mover in consciousness space. So you intend it, you get data back. It's a telepathic. Very seldom do you get English sentences. You can sometimes, if that's the only thing you're looking for, the system may give that to you. But most of the time, particularly as you get more familiar with it, you don't get that because it's so inefficient. It's so constraining. With telepathy, you don't get a string of things like an English sentence. You get a paragraph or a chapter all in one chunk, bang, and you get that understanding. You don't have it in detail like you would if you had the linear structure of it, but you've got all the important sense of it. Everything that's important to you, it gets in just this one chunk. So that's how you communicate. So you can see things. You're getting data. You're interpreting the data. Two different people will interpret it differently. So when Dennis and I were out there seeing it, there were some differences, but the differences were the differences in Dennis and I, not in the data that we were getting. It was obvious we were getting something that was very similar, but we just described it differently. And as I heard his description, I could see why somebody would describe it that way. I might have two on a different day. It was that sort of thing. And same with him. You could kind of see that it was just a personal choice in words. Because we get the data, we then have to take that data and run it through our filter. After we run it through our own filter of beliefs and fears and knowledge and experience, we then have to put it in language. So now we have to constrict it further to fit language and metaphors. We can only use metaphors that we know. So we're limited in language to the metaphors and symbols that we know. So if we have a narrow, more constrictive set of metaphors and symbols, then our description of it becomes more and more abstract and less of what was actually there. Yes, ma'am.
What's one of the best ways to make that filter thinner?
Okay, and that's a good question, and that's really what we should be doing, right? Is making that filter thinner and thinner and thinner to where your interpretation is closer and closer to actually what's there. Well, the way you do it is you get rid of the fear, the beliefs, the ego. Those are the big things, right? You just toss them out. Oh, that's easy to say, hard to do, right? How do you toss them out? Well, here's some advice on tossing them out. Beliefs are very hard to discover. You have beliefs that you don't know that you have those beliefs. Most of you have a hard time with virtual reality because you have a belief that this physical reality is solid and whatever, and that makes sense, and the virtual reality is really hard to, how does that work? Because we have this belief. It's not an intellectual belief, it's cultural belief. You have a lot of cultural beliefs, just things you believe that reality is like that just because of osmosis from your culture. Just because that group mind we were talking about that defines your culture, put those there in your head, just because you're a part of the culture. So you have all those kinds of beliefs, your cultural beliefs, scientific beliefs, of course there's religious beliefs, personal beliefs, all sorts of things. They're hard to name. You'll name a few of your intellectual ones, the ones that are actually in your mind, you might name a couple. Same with fears. Very hard to name. You have fears that you don't even know you have. Lots of them are beneath your intellect. So don't work with the beliefs and fears right away. Let those go. The thing that's easy to spot is ego. Is it about you? Is your concept, it's the thought, is the feeling, is whatever it is you're doing, your interaction, is it about you? Is it really about what you want and need and desire and, that sort of thing? If it is, it's just ego. Or is it about somebody else and their needs or what you think would be good for them? And not that you know that it would be good for them because you know more about what they should be doing than they do. That's you. That's not about them. So in any case, finding ego is almost trivial. If you look for it, most of us will find it every other word we speak. Every other sentence we form up, we'll find ego in it. When you find that ego, you have to then trace it back to the fear, because it comes from a fear, or it may come from a belief. The belief probably comes from a fear, so trace it back to the fear. When you get to the fear, then deal with the fear. How do you deal with the fear? Only antidote to fear is courage. So the way you deal with the fear is you say, all right, I'll accept the fear. I'll accept the fear that nobody likes me. I accept the fear that, whatever it is that's driving that particular behavior or intent of yours, I'll just accept it'll be that way. Okay, that's all right with me. I can live through that. I can deal with it. I accept it. All right, now the fear has no claws, no bite, no teeth, because you've already accepted it. And you've dealt with it in your mind. Some people have the fear of going out of body. They say, if I go out of body, maybe I won't come back. Maybe I'll die, because once I get the spirit out of my body, my body can't live without a spirit in it. And if it doesn't come back, the body will die. Well, that's all nonsense. Of course, it's not like you don't have a body. Your thing doesn't live in your body. It's not like that. But they have this fear. Well, if that's a fear of yours, the only way you're going to get through it is to say, okay, I accept that. I'll die. It's worth it to me to pursue this line of investigation. And if it kills me, okay, I accept it. Now after that, you have no more fear. You've already accepted it, you see. Now most of us don't have fears that dramatic, Usually it has to do with our sense of self-esteem, our adequacy, our competency. Not competency necessarily at work, but as a human being, as a person, with who we are. Are we what we should be? And we're not. We have fears about that. Those are the sorts of things. And you react to people. You have fears about your children. My children are going to grow up and be drug addicts, so I lock them in a closet, don't let them out until they're over 21, that sort of thing, because then they'll have better judgment. Well, if you do that to your children, you'll probably drive them to be drug addicts, right? That's making your fears come true. So it's that sort of thing. So you have a fear and you say, well, I'm just doing it for the kids. It's just because I love them. It's really all about them and it's love. Well, it's not. It's your fear about what might happen, and you want to control it. It's that control that anytime you're trying to control something, you have these wants and needs. That's ego. Trace the ego back to the fear, and let go of the fear. Then you'll be able to act constructively without the fear. So that's how to do it. Look for ego, and most of us, it's easy. It's real easy to find. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, right in front of your nose. And most people, I tell them that, and I'll get an email back about 2 weeks later, and it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize, how much fear I've got. Fear is dominating my life. Everything I do, is ego related to fear. And they had no idea. And I always get at least one, usually young male in the audience who, when I'm talking about this, and he'll say, oh, I don't have any fears. I don't have any fears. And it's, and it's just like, well, trust me, start working on the ego, and you'll find some. But that's, we all are mostly driven by ego and fear, which of course is why the world is the way it is, because that's the way we mostly are. Yes, sir.
I think that so much of it starts in childhood, because I think the most common thing kids hear is don't. and kids don't have a lot of the restrictions. They have great imaginations, and
right.
They get further along these things, and then we get worried, like, woo, this kid's way out. And like, don't tell anybody else that, type of a thing. You realize how much you're restricted by those that, if you will, love you so much.
Sure.
But they're trying to protect you, but they really are doing anything but that. Because the greatest protection is really allowing you to, we want to call it experiment or just,
Yeah, just be
Burn.
a lot of the fears that we get out of our culture are fears that have to do with control. Most of us feel like we have to control everything. Well, what should I do to be healthy? What should I eat? What vitamins should I take? We have all these things, and what we're trying to do is control, control the outcome. Well, I don't want to be like this, so I'll control it this way. We want to manipulate our world to be the way we want it to be for us. Well, that's all ego and fear, basically. It's better to let go of the control and just be who you are. And if you are just who you are, and that causes you to get slapped a few times, well, learn from it. Don't be that way anymore if you get hit, Learn from it, grow, and as that works, you find that's a much better way to go through life than trying to manipulate life to be the way you want it to be. All right, I want to have a house in the suburbs, 2 cars, a dog named Spot, 2.5 children, whatever is average, and we're gonna do that because that's good, and that's all fear driven. Better to just be who you are, be honest, be open, care about people, and just go on with your life. I mean, it doesn't mean you're irresponsible or an airhead. You still have obligations. You still have to go to work. You still have to pay your mortgage. You still have to do things, but do it in that kind of way. If you go through life that way, then everything just works out great for you, and it works. It gets rid of the fear. This man.
Lady back here.
Is it natural, or what stimulates a young child to have a lot of anomalous, paranormal, and out-of-body experiences?
Well, children kind of have one foot in this reality and one foot in the larger reality up to about 7 years old. So imaginary friends aren't necessarily imaginary. That's just what we tell them. Mostly they're interacting, with other things, and these things are just as real to them as this stuff is. We're the ones that convince them it isn't. A lot of children are very intuitive. A lot of children communicate telepathically. How else could they possibly learn language? They don't memorize it. They don't learn by memorizing vocabulary words. That's not how they learn language. They intuit the meaning and the sense of the communication, and that helps them. So it's natural for children to be connected to the larger consciousness system. By 7, we've taught them to think and be linearly and logically. We push our kids to read, but reading is one of those things that forces us into linear processing. I mean, reading is good, but it's here, practice your linear processing, practice your control and all these kinds of things. And as they learn that, well, they have to learn to read, right? As they learn that, they kind of let go of this right brain stuff that doesn't seem to apply and makes everybody laugh at them when they talk about it.
They also don't necessarily even talk about it to each other as
No.
children.
They learn that it's their own private space and their own private experiences.
Right, because I had it I still do, but I had it very strongly as a child, and I never told anyone.
Right.
And I'm wondering why I never consciously thought that I'd be in trouble or that it was strange. I just
At a deeper level, you were aware that it was your personal experience, and it really wasn't meant for anybody else. It was kind of private to you. It's not an objective experience. It's a subjective experience, and much gets lost in the translation, in the explanation. And rather than try to go there, you just kind of know that other people aren't going to really relate to it because it's your personal subjective experience. You can't really share an experience with anybody. You could describe it. You could say, well, I was just talking to these people and in my head and they kind of gave me this information, and people can't deal with that. They can't process it because it's not their experience. If it's not their experience, it can't be their truth. So even if they're very caring people with a very open-minded, all they can do is go, okay, good,
So
good for you, but they can't really join you in the experience. It's a personal
Are
experience.
we given these experiences, or are we aware of these things that as children? so that we can evolve more? I mean, is the purpose
Yeah.
of it?
Well, it's both. Some of them that we're given, and some of them we just go out and get. We're consciousness. A child's conscious, and they can go get in that database like anybody else. They can do things. They can connect. They can ask questions, and they'll get answers. So they can, and when you get an answer, your interpretation is that that's a being. You're talking to a being. We don't get an answer and say, "Oh, that's a rock," because that doesn't compute for us. So anything that gives us an answer, we immediately turn into a being. That's our interpretation. Okay, we don't say, "Oh, that's data coming from, the server." That's not the way we see it. It's a being, and those beings then can become friends because that interface can become very familiar. Matter of fact, that's what a guide is. A guide is just your own personal interface with the larger consciousness system. That's all it is. It's not that there's really some kind of little being floating around over your head all the time, thinking looking at every thought and focused on your experience. The guide bubbles up out of the larger conscious system to interact with you with a consistent interface. Humor, personality, all of those things. Sure, it's your private, personal interface. And it bubbles up just like you bubble up out of that larger conscious system to be here with its experience.
Are
See?
there rules with that? In other words, people
Yes.
explain it the same way. So are there rules with which children see it and experience it and know it?
So the two ways is, one, they just get the information and they interpret it the best way they can. Okay. Now, generally in the larger conscious system, if you put out a query, you'll get something back. Okay, if you're open to it. Children are open to it. They're not closed in by being they don't have these constraints on what's possible like adults do. So everything's possible. They're open. They know the world is magic. I mean, everything in there is magic. Their parents are magic. Everything happens by magic. Cars are magic. Airplanes are magic. Everything's magic to them. So they're open to it. They get it. They interact with it, and they get whatever they get from it. Every child's different. It's just like they have this communication, this interface. They get whatever they get from it. So that's one thing. They get it. The other thing is the larger consciousness system can give them that. Why? To help them for whatever reason. It may be just to help them because they're really lonely. It may be to help them have a bigger idea of how reality works. Let them be familiar with interacting with this larger consciousness system. So the system is very interactive with us. So the system may say, well, here's a child that this would help them. This increases their probability of growing up and lowering their entropy. Well, then that's a good reason for the system to push that information at you. It's going to help you. Maybe you're an old soul that has done all these things before in many lives, and all you need to do is kind of catch up to the point where you were real quickly and then go on with the new stuff. Well, the larger conscious system is going to be pouring this stuff at you to help you catch up, to stimulate you to make the connections you need to make. See, things will happen. You'll have a lot of that synchronicity going on in your life, even as a small child, to help you keep going again, to help you, retrace those steps. So, yeah, some of it's pushed, some of it's not, and the thing that makes the difference is does the information that a person gets lower or raise the probability of evolution of their consciousness? If it raises it, the system's in favor and it'll support it. If it lowers it, if it lowers the entropy, the system's in favor. If it raises the entropy and moves them toward de-evolution, the system is against it. So so it just depends on the individual. And somebody always asks, does everybody have a guide? No, not everybody needs a guide. Those people who aren't open, won't pay any attention, don't hear. If they did hear, they wouldn't act on it. What do they need an interface with the larger conscious system for? All you'd be doing is forcing data in front of their face that they wouldn't know what to do with. It causes more fear. They'll think they're crazy, or they'll have other kinds of things. It'll cause problems for them, make them more fearful. So no, not everybody has an interface. But if you are complex enough that you need 2 interfaces or 3 interfaces, you get whatever you need. Whatever's going to work for you, the system will do that. So it's very individual in that sense, that we kind of get what we need and what we deserve, what we can use.
One of the things I find most fascinating with people, including myself, is that how often we're intuitive of things and we reject that
You
very
reject it.
information.
Sure.
We marry someone we shouldn't. We don't invest when we should. All of those things. It's a remarkable kind of phenomenon because it's not like we're not getting the information.
Right. And a lot of that, the consciousness system is giving you that information, and they're also making you aware of the fact that you rejected it, and then you realize that the rejection was a bad idea, that you really should have done it. And, you know, unfortunately, we're pretty dumb students. You know, we don't learn too quickly. We do that again and again and again. And the larger consciousness system is like, you know, well, we'll try it again. Maybe you'll get it this time. And it's consistent. But if you refuse to even acknowledge it, or that you did get it, you just reject it without even getting it up into your mind, then it's no longer a learning tool. Then you won't get it anymore. So if there's something you want to have happen, as far as the larger conscious system, you really want to have out of body, you really want to see auras, you want to do these things, then make that thing be on your path to evolution, and it's likely to happen. If it's on your path to ego, oh, hey, I can see auras, you know, I can do this, I can do that. If it's on your path to ego, it probably won't happen. So that's how, you know, so get ready. Make yourself ready for the event. Use an intent that you're ready and why you think this is going to help you grow up, and you'll find the system will be very cooperative with you. If it's just a joyride, like, you know, a new ride at, you know, at the theme park, oh, I want to go out of body, it'd be so cool, you know. I could go into the girls' locker room and see what was going on. You know, if it's that kind of thing, then you're not going to get any help. You're going to struggle and struggle, and nothing will ever happen until you get discouraged and forget about it. So some people have multiple guides, some people have no guides. Some people, a guide will service 2 or 3 or 4 people themselves because there's not a whole lot of talk going on. Why can't you get your guide to talk to you? You know, a lot of people say, well, my guides won't communicate with me. Guides don't like to communicate intellectually because then your intellect is not where the action is. You have to change at the being level, not at the intellectual level. At the intellectual level, you act. At the being level, you are. There's a big difference. To carry on an intellectual conversation is often counterproductive. Mostly it's ego and counterproductive. So if a guide thinks that that's what's, you know, it's just going to be an intellectual exchange, giving you cool information that you'd really like to know, you're not going to get that kind of a communication. You'll get other kinds of communications in synchronicities, or, you know, what you're saying, an intuition of things. You'll get other sorts of things, but you're not going to get this dialogue. Now, if the dialogue, again, is on your path to growing up, and you're going to process that at a being level, it has some probability of changing you in that sense, you'll get dialogue. If you can't, you know, if you don't do well with telepathy, you might even get sentences and language and voice. That happens. But mostly, we all find telepathy to be more efficient than that. So it's a matter of what you need and who you are and what you're ready for, and